Yeah.
happy.
Okay, well let's start here. So if you remember, we've gone through Saul's kind of he's risen to being king. We kind of saw that he struggled with the donkeys, and we've kind of taken a path that kind of showed that he was kind of a bad shepherd. And then you see David has come onto the scene, and he's like a good shepherd the whole time. Like that's, and we see that even in this battle with David and Goliath, that he's still out shepherding the flocks, and they're all right there. It almost seems like they're kind of giving cues to like good administration too. He's able to put people in charge of that, and so he defeated Goliath, and in a very God-centric way, with like this five smooth stones. Jesus might say something to the order of like a mustard seed type way of defeating Goliath, like type of thing. And what we talked about last week was what you hear a lot of times from the preaching ilk or Bible studies is that David and Goliath's thing is like, oh, God will help you defeat the Goliath, the big things in your life, type of thing. But I really think when you read the story, you see that David is God's man, and that God's man was defeating for you, type of thing. And that's an easy analog to put onto the Messiah, onto Jesus. That Jesus is God's man, and that he's saving us from the Goliaths. He's saving us from sin, death, and the grave, and like all those things. So that's kind of how I use David and Goliath. That's a sermon that I love to preach, but man, it's hard to give people the details for them to see that within a reasonable amount of time. And by reasonable, I mean 45 minutes. so that's the but we'll start here today. So we're going to be in 18. This is right after the David and Goliath story, and we'll probably read the whole chapter and kind of talk about what's going on. There's some things that we quoted last week that are in this chapter. So let me make sure I got where I need to be. All right, now let me share it. Yeah, Zoom seems to be more snappy now. And let me know if the sound doesn't sound right. Although, see, I hit that button and nothing happens. Come on. Share sound, optimize for video, that one. Boom. All right, here we go.
Now when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him go home to his father's house any more. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant, because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him and gave it to David, with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. So David went out wherever Saul sent him and behaved wisely. And Saul set him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Now it had happened, as they were coming home, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. So the women sang as they danced, and said,
Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s.
Then Saul was very angry, and the saying displeased him.
They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom?
So Saul eyed David from that day forward. And it happened on the next day that the distressing spirit from God came upon Saul, and he prophesied inside the house. So David played music with his hand, as at other times. But there was a spear in Saul's hand, and Saul cast the spear, for he said,
I will pin David to the wall.
But David escaped his presence twice. Now Saul was afraid of David, because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from his presence, and made him his captain over 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David behaved wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Therefore, when Saul saw that he behaved very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them. Then Saul said to David,
Here is my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles.
For Saul thought,
Let my hand not be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him.
So David said to Saul,
Who am I? And what is my life or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king?
But it happened at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel the Meholathite as a wife. Now Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. So Saul said,
I will give her to him, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him.
Therefore Saul said to David a second time,
You shall be my son-in-law today.
And Saul commanded his servants,
Communicate with David secretly and say, Look, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now therefore, become the king's son-in-law.
So Saul's servants spoke those words in the hearing of David. And David said,
Does it seem to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing I am a poor and lightly esteemed man?
And the servants of Saul told him,
In this manner David spoke.
Thus you shall say to David, The king does not desire any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines to take vengeance on the king's enemies.
But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to become the king's son-in-law. Now the days had not expired. Therefore David arose and went, he and his men, and killed 200 men of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, and they gave them in full count to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave him Michal, his daughter, as a wife. Thus Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the princes of the Philistines went out to war. And so it was, whenever they went out, that David behaved more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name became highly esteemed.
Okay.
So it's all the women's fault.
It's all the women's fault.
Lousy father.
Is that what you're getting from that, Fred? Yeah, like that.
It says something other.
Yeah. I'm sure that's the linchpin, right? Like that's it. All right, so we got Fred's hot take. All that. So what kind of stands out to you here in the reading? What kind of stood out to you?
Well, where it said Saul prophesied in his house,
Okay.
the Jewish Bible says rave in the house.
Rave?
Rave, R-A-V.
Really, like a party?
Yeah, no.
Or like rant and rave.
Oh, he raged. Rage. Okay.
R-A-V-E.
All right.
Not a rave.
The Spirit of God gripped Saul, and he began to rave in the house.
Okay, that's interesting.
Wow, David was.
What do the other translations have? Like
That would be
the prophesied is
10.
King James. I'll look at the NIV. real quick.
18:10.
Let's see.
Mine doesn't even mention anything.
Oh, really?
In 8 it does, and Saul was very angry. and was saying displeased.
So it doesn't have that verse, is what you're saying?
No,
No,
he
he said-
he was reading 9, right?
10.
And 10, and mine said that in 8 he was angry, but not when I get down to that one.
Let's see here. So
It
10.
said he cast a spear at him, though.
So
he
in-
had been angry. That's what
In-
it's down in there.
NIV has him prophesying.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
I read something about.
That's interesting. Let's see. Does this thing say anything about that? No.
Saul's vexation and his fit of mental disorder, rave, speak in ecstasy.
Yeah. So kind of. So
Really out of it.
yeah. So it's so they come out now. Now there was some ink spilt in some of the commentary stuff that I was reading about that phrase, like Saul is slain his thousands and David his 10,000s. And I think that is an important thing, because we see all these people now, they're starting to connect David and his victories with, over and above Saul himself, like where David is, being said in the same breath as Saul in a lot of ways. And you're starting to see that Saul has a real power complex going on, like this. Because I would say that this whole chapter is really characterized by David can't really do anything wrong. Let's see. So like he was playing music with him, and Saul cast the spear on him. Like that. This is not the only time this happens in the story. Like that. That's kind of, that's not the best behavior to be having, and all these things. And it keeps saying that Saul was afraid of David. Is that how the other translations are rendering it? And he has him removed from his presence. But I think, let's see, verse 15 I thought was very interesting. Therefore, when Saul saw that David behaved very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all of Israel and Judah loved David and went out. So he's sending them out into these different things, and he keeps saying that David is making good decisions. And we really see that Saul just doesn't seem to make good decisions, as he's going throughout here. And here David is making good decisions no matter what, type of thing. The guy can do no wrong, type of thing. And it's interesting that Saul is afraid of this. And I was reading something not too long ago, and they really connected it to sometimes our smallness and our worry of situations can make us act like Saul in these situations where we get worried about someone being better than us or something like that, and we start getting angry and afraid of them rather than just embodying our own skin, type of thing. And I thought that was an interesting little note type of thing. Just about us. Let's see.
In verse 10,
Yeah.
is the next day a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul.
Yeah.
So what is
Well, I think we talked about it last week a little bit, with talking about how those spirits of God were kind of coming onto Saul.
why would it be harm? You don't think of God as
Yeah. Well, I think the way we kind of way I kind of render that is, so we have to do two things here. We have to try to translate it into something today, but also allow it to say what it's saying too. So we'll separate those out a little bit. I still think we say things like this today, like that if you see someone that is mentally distressed or something like that, we would probably say, it's like, oh well, they've got a nasty spirit on them.
Possessed.
Something like
He was
that.
in a bad mood that day.
Yeah, like I think that's a valid reading. Now, we got to remember that if you go all the way over there, you can't all the way over to where he was in a bad mood that day, which I think is pretty valid. You still can't get away from. You can't just wipe it away of like, oh, well, that spirit's from the Lord too, because then you're dishonoring what's happening here. So I think it's good to have both, because they keep talking about how this distressing spirit from God came over him. And it really seems to me like they're using it almost like a colloquialism about talking about how like there's something big going on inside of Saul. That it's not just like, oh, I spilt something on my pants and they're now dirty.
Is it his not willingness to do what he knew God would want him to do? Is it his going by his own way?
Yeah.
That's the battle.
I think it's that going his own way, but I think there's something going on emotionally and mentally with Saul.
He's breaking down.
Like that's and that, I think that's the biggest thing that we got to get from this. And I think the authors here are trying to tell us that there's like, it's not just a bad day that he's having. Like this is bigger than just a bad day, you know? So are they just calling it a bad spirit from God? Like, no, I think they're trying to convey, it's like, this is bigger. Just like when we've all encountered those people who are truly mentally ill, you know, and I think it's trying to convey that. But as I say that, don't let what I'm saying push aside what it's actually saying in the text.
I think that Saul, rather than turning to God and saying to God, what am I doing wrong that David has become your chosen?
Yeah.
Saul is taking it upon himself to eliminate the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say
rather than going to God and say, how can we make this better?
Yeah.
It's forget, I'm going to do it on my own.
Yeah.
Which again, to me, reading that, I jump ahead to Solomon.
Yeah.
When he wanted Bathsheba.
Oh yeah, David.
They keep talking about sending David to the front of the line.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah, let somebody else take care of it.
So you connected that. I wrote David and Bathsheba down here at verse 17. Yeah. Like,
you go fight for me.
Yeah, like that was. Well, I'm glad other people are connecting that, because that's. I think that's. I think where you start seeing these stories rhyme, you know, where you're just it's over there. So David's being sent to the front lines,
right?
And we see that's what David does when he wants to get rid of someone who's, you know.
And Saul says, "Oh, I'll let God take care of getting rid of him."
Yeah.
Like he did that before with the sacrificing and stuff. Like,
yeah.
God's gonna do what I need him to do.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do what he needs.
Yeah. I'm glad you guys caught that, because I was like, oh, that's interesting when I was like, because that's so we're getting that from like that verse 17, and just like Saul keeps trying to just throw David into bad situations, and David just keeps getting out of it because he's smart. like that's.
And verse 10 that about in the Jewish Bible, they say in the notes this is Saul's vexation and fit of mental disorder.
Okay.
They put that in the notes. But I thought it was interesting too, because he started doing that raving or whatever while David was playing the lyre, and that's why David had been called initially, and that calmed him. So now it's not common anymore.
Oh yeah.
Now he's throwing swords.
Yeah, now he's throwing swords at him.
It's in too deep. It's in too deep. So there's this whole thing with Saul's daughters. Like he promises Merab, and then like takes it away. Like, you know, who knows what's going on, why he's taken away and not. You know, does it mean he's just a bad leader? Is he trying to egg David on? You know, what's going on there? And he finally gives him Michal, and he's going to be a snare, but it ends up being kind of a snare to Saul, in general. And he's like, oh, how dare you guys be happy? And so he keeps sending them out to the Philistines. Now I wrote some interesting notes. I read some interesting notes about verse 25 and the request for the 100 foreskins rather than a dowry. Like that's a nice dowry, right? Like And that would, rather than just placing in slavery, that would have been like a next level of shame on the Philistines, and they would probably fight all the more. And David would be even put into a more dangerous situation, is the note that I thought. I was like, oh, that seems astute.
The ultimate.
Yeah.
It says Saul intended to bring about David's death.
Yeah.
At the hand of the Philistines.
Yeah, yeah. So like I thought that was interesting, kind of like I'd never really read that before into it. Like, oh, that was like let's see if we can upset the Philistines that much more.
200.
Yeah.
So,
More than he needed.
More than he needed, yeah. And again, like the wisdom and all that stuff. Like you meant this for evil.
What,
Like
what
that's-
David must have thought at that time about Saul, what he must have been looking at him going, what is going on?
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
he'd only come to help, and he'd continually been put into danger.
Yeah.
And then the repercussions are never good, you know, although he did get the daughter in the end, but
He didn't get the one he wanted though.
Yeah.
he didn't. He got the next one,
He got the next one.
a lower.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
ended up
Loved
like,
him,
but she
yeah.
loved
David
him,
likes the
ended up being
ladies.
good, yeah.
Like that's
Yeah,
like
he did. He was happy.
He's not,
But he's kind of
Yeah.
wondering what's going on with his father-in-law or his master kind of thing.
And we're gonna see this as we go through this story. But David's serving of the king is important to see, because that's another thing which I think is an undercurrent of David's righteousness, that he never just goes ahead and takes the throne.
Right.
Right, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Try to kill him all those times.
Yeah.
Every chance.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that the Bible is really kind of displaying as the righteousness of David, and that's something that I think that we can work on too, as we sit under bodies and authorities and all that stuff. So yeah,
An interesting comment on verse 22, 20, not 22, 20 also.
Michal is the only named woman in all biblical narrative of whom it is said she loves a man.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's interesting. Yeah. So there's some agency.
Yeah, there's a little bit of, sorry ladies.
Yeah. Well, that's
the
so.
ladies didn't count in.
No, they didn't. You're right.
Yeah. So, and that's just like what you're saying. The ladies didn't count. So when you see a lady doing something that is important, and especially when you see a lady doing something that has agency, like that is cataclysmic. Like that's and that's a good example of that. Like the easiest example is all of the Gospels have the ladies proclaiming the resurrection. Like that's huge. Like that's huge that's even there. And the fact that our church bodies often overlook that, I think, is a shame on us because of what Ed just pulled out of
Can it
it.
also be that her love for him is because she can really see the goodness?
So
I mean, they all know what's
Purity.
going on. Saul is making it quite plain. I'm
Well.
looking to get rid of this guy.
David wasn't exactly pure.
yeah.
No, you're right.
What also is her love being a stand-in for the general people too. That her emotions are being used as
The
people are loving him as well.
What's
Choosing him
interesting
over
then
Saul.
is that Saul actually agreed to give her to him.
Yeah,
Right.
he thought it was going to
Yeah,
be
he
bad.
thought it was going to be a
Yeah.
snare.
yeah,
He
like,
didn't do it because he thought it'd be
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Having a daughter that loves him, if Saul was trying to do something behind his back,
Yeah,
we have to assume she'll be there to defend David.
yeah, yeah,
So, because it says Saul grew more afraid of David.
yeah. And he keeps growing more
Yeah.
afraid.
Yeah, he gives her in marriage, and now it's whoops. Now I got to worry about her.
And so so that's verse 28 and
29.
and 29. And let's see, and yeah, so like all the servants of Saul, so that his name became highly esteemed. So David behaved more wisely. There we go. Than all the servants of Saul. Then you have that. David's doing the right things. So all right, well, let's go into 19. We'll read all of this chapter, and we'll go on from there. So let's see here. We'll hit this button, and then we hit share, and we restart chapter 19.
Now Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted greatly in David. So Jonathan told David,
My father Saul seeks to kill you. Therefore, please be on your guard until morning, and stay in a secret place and hide. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are. And I will speak with my father about you. Then what I observe, I will tell you.
Thus Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father.
Let not the king sin against his servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his works have been very good toward you. For he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood, to kill David without a cause?
So Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan, and Saul swore,
As the Lord lives, he shall not be killed.
Then Jonathan called David, and Jonathan told him all these things. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. And there was war again. And David went out and fought with the Philistines, and struck them with a mighty blow, and they fled from him. Now the distressing spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand. And David was playing music with his hand. Then Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he slipped away from Saul's presence, and he drove the spear into the wall. So David fled and escaped that night. Saul also sent messengers to David's house to watch him and to kill him in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, told him,
If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed.
So Michal let David down through a window, and he went and fled and escaped. And Michal took an image and laid it in the bed, put a cover of goat's hair for his head, and covered it with clothes. So when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said,
He is sick.
Then Saul sent the messengers back to see David.
Bring him up to me in the bed, that I may kill him.
And when the messengers had come in, there was the image in the bed, with a cover of goat's hair for his head. Then Saul said to Michal,
Why have you deceived me like this, and sent my enemy away, so that he has escaped?
He said to me, Let me go. Why should I kill you?
So David fled and escaped, and went to Samuel at Ramah, and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and stayed in Naioth. Now it was told Saul,
Take note, David is at Naioth in Ramah.
Then Saul sent messengers to take David. And when they saw the group of prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as leader over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. And when Saul was told, he sent other messengers, and they prophesied likewise. Then Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they prophesied also. Then he also went to Ramah, and came to the great well that is at Secu. So he asked,
"Where are Samuel and David?"
And someone said,
"Indeed, they are at Naioth in Ramah."
So he went there to Naioth in Ramah. Then the Spirit of God was upon him also, and he went on and prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. And he also stripped off his clothes, and prophesied before Samuel in like manner, and lay down naked all that day and all that night. Therefore they say, Is Saul also among the prophets?
Okay, all right. That's weird at the end. Let's
Weird.
wait.
Yeah.
Like that. There's lots of
Weird.
yeah. There's lots of ink that's spread on the weirdness at the end there. So let's save it. Let's get there first. Let's get there first. All right. So what stood out besides that at the end? What stood out to you? What did you think was interesting here?
More than a bad day.
More.
So Saul was, God gave him more than a bad day.
Oh yeah.
You know,
It's continuing.
it's good more so.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's narcissistic.
What do they mean? What's the literal of prophesied? What are they
Are you
saying?
talking about the end there, Ed?
No, just the whole thing where all the messengers went and they said they prophesied and they prophesied.
Okay, let's see.
Jewish Bible says speaking in ecstasy.
Yeah.
Speaking in ecstasy. It's
Raving, going nuts.
so I have a feeling.
Good ecstasy.
Yeah, I have a feeling what's going on there is kind of what they may be trying to get across is like Saul is speaking out of himself. So where like if you've ever been around people again that are having mental anguish and they're just saying just utterings out of their mouth. Could that be what that is meaning right now? Because it's saying it always when things aren't going well for him. It's not like he's prophesying here and then the Lord is like with him again. Like it's obvious that there's a distressing thing. So is it that same kind of language where like you watch an Indiana Jones movie and there's like some like witch lady that's kind of in the mud and all that stuff and her eyes roll back in the back of her head and she starts speaking. Is that kind of what they're trying to talk about here? I'm not sure like that's, but it's definitely nothing positive, so that's, it's obvious like with the Hebrew, the Jewish Bible, they're committing to like this rave idea, like this out of ecstasy and just, you don't really know what you're saying type of idea kind of coming out of there. And also, if you remember what we know about groups of people, especially groups of people in the past, when someone would start talking in what would be like New Testament language, like in tongues and just like they would really view them as like kind of a spiritual master. I'm kind of revealing some stuff at the end there, but it's all kind of connected there. So I don't really know exactly what to do, but when you look at the context of it, it's nothing good. So it's like, all right, so how are they viewing this as prophecy? And I have a feeling it's coming from that, like he's just uttering ramblings, just kind of coming out.
And the ones before, if you're asking about those, is it his servants that he sent ahead to go after David? And they start prophesizing. Is that just they get there and they're not able to even think about the task at hand? They go into like now they're doing something totally different. This prophesizing and worshiping or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But they're like lost to Saul's orders.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. That's kind of how I looked at it. Like,
yeah,
they head out to do this job for him, and they're taken away from it, and they can't get back to it, and it's frustration for Saul. That's.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's definitely. I think there's a lot of frustration that's being talked about here, and it's trying to give it language. that's meaningful. It's trying to give it language that's meaningful. Here to talk about this is all bigger than just he spilled chocolate milk on his pants and now he has to clean them type of thing. Like that's like it's trying to do that. So I marked that area around verse 5. For he took his life in his hands and killed the Philistine. And so this is when Jonathan is trying to calm Saul down. And I thought the language was interesting. So he took his life into his hands, and he killed the Philistine, and the Lord brought about great deliverance for all Israel. You saw it and rejoice. Will you sin against innocent blood and kill David without a cause? All those things, like he brought are the exact opposites of Saul. Like David put his life into he put himself into harm's way to be the savior. It's everything I've been saying about what David did for all those people. Saul hasn't done anything like that. Like that. That's where he's really put himself into that harm's way. Like that's all that's like, and you even rejoiced in this. Like that's that kind of turning it around on him. And so I thought that was interesting verbiage that Jonathan was saying.
Very interesting.
Like that it's kind of subtle there. Also, you get this sense of Saul. He's living a convictionist life, except for the conviction of his own power. Like that's so. Like Jonathan speaks up for David, and he's like, "All right, fine." And he's been on this warpath to kill him, and then Jonathan talks to him, and whatever.
You see a little bit of Jewish humor in there. It says, "Is Saul also among the prophets?"
Oh yeah.
It's like
that's
like probably the people were probably thinking about Saul and David making fun of Saul.
Yeah.
And now the writer says, somebody said, "Oh, is he with the prophets?"
Yeah. So that's actually a good point, because the Bible kind of changed for me when I allowed myself to read it with some sarcasm. Like that's when I was able to, like, because I was always taught it's like, oh, it's like the scriptures, like this is how it is, type of thing, like
stern words.
Yeah, stern words, and this is like all that stuff, and I'm like, and I think Fred just kind of brought up a good point there, like allow it to have some sarcasm, and it's like, oh, it may actually speak a lot more truth. Then you got to interpret it more, but that's, and so that's kind of.
Well, and that kind of connects it to when he was made king. They said that about him too. Oh, is Saul among the prophets?
Yeah.
And now at the end,
yeah,
it's bad now.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Run around
it
naked.
wasn't so bad then.
Okay, so there's a weird part of the story that's right there. So like the sarcasm helps us get here. And there's an issue in it that is going unsaid. Okay, but it's there. Did you catch it?
The idol.
The idol.
Why do they have an idol?
Like that, the idol.
And it's a big idol.
Yeah, and it's a big idol. Like that. It's the image there. Like that. Suddenly there's an image in the house, in the bedroom, like that. And there's an idol in the house, in the bedroom, big enough to like where they can trick people into thinking that it's sick David.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like that.
Right.
That's and they put goat hair on it, and like that. That's
hide him.
Yeah. So like that's. Like that's a big thing.
What
and
verse was that?
13.
Yeah, it's 13 and 16. Yeah, that whole like paragraph is kind of
Where'd that come from?
Yeah, it's like, well, why is that there? And is it the author's kind of revealing in a sarcastic way? It's like, hey, these people aren't as
worshiping
aren't as righteous as you think they are. Like that. That's and kind of going into there.
I thought it was cute too how Michael said, "You better run. I've been spying on Saul, and he's going to kill you. So you get the heck out of here." Lets him down out of a window, and then when Saul comes around, she says,
He told me, help me or I'll kill you.
Yeah.
Saving her own butt.
And I had
Wasn't me, I didn't do it.
That she lied for him type of thing. Like
Yeah.
that was my note that I had there. Yeah. All right. So let's get down into the nakedness down here.
Yeah.
So a couple of the notes that I read about this was that taking off the kingly garments was akin to like saying I'm not the king anymore. I don't know, but it's so odd that they're so specific about this. But like if you like again get the sarcastic brain going again, but also just get like what is the imagery? Why are the authors writing it down like this? What is the imagery where now all of a sudden he's naked laying on the ground?
I see it as they see him for who he really is.
Yeah, it reminded me of like the King's New Clothes. Yeah. That classic story there, and that's like, so I think the way you put it there, like kind of they're seeing who he actually is, and then you allow for the sarcastic reading over there was like, oh, is he among the prophets type of thing, and
which is saying he's probably in the insane asylum somewhere.
Yeah, like that's
like that.
Yeah, like that could be a valid reading. It could be a valid reading. So like that's, but I do think like we see him strip of his own clothes. I think we're definitely seeing that there's a struggle with the office of the king there, and especially with him just lying around naked. Like that's nakedness is always kind of tends to present someone not in their best light in the scriptures. Yeah, like that's.
David danced naked in the street, though.
Right, we'll get there.
Dancing,
We'll get there. We'll get there. Well, and isn't that near the end of David? Like that may be saying the same story. That may be saying the same story.
There's prophesying. Is that looked as good or bad in that society now? If if you had somebody wandering around prophesying, how were they where do they fit in the
So yeah, I think we often always look at prophesying as like a good thing. But I think we had Fred's like sarcastic reading of it. It's like, oh, look at this guy's a prophet now, like all those things and whatever that all could mean. I think also like you people would consider, like again I said, like the Indiana Jones movies where you have like the lady that like like, ooh, she's prophesying, and then, or you have like the speaking in tongues thing, kind of like New Testament language, and that's why Paul's like, hey, we got to make sure we have some order to this tongue speaking. It's not always super righteous here, like that's. So I think it
could be either way.
Yeah. So like that's you can let it. And one of my oldest phrases is like when you see something weird in the Bible, like let it be weird. Like that's that's so this prophesying thing and all that stuff. Like continue to let it be weird. Like try to figure it out, see what it's trying to tell you. But this one, it could be a myriad of meanings, and we're smart enough to be able to hold a lot of those meanings at the same time in our head to be able to see, okay, where does each one of those take us, and show us a different color of the text. So that's yeah. And so all right, so that's good. That's good. Let's see. Yeah, we got time. Let's do 20. Let's get through 20, and so we'll read the whole thing here. Yeah, it's a big one. But it's a big one in ideas too.
Then David fled from Naioth in Ramah and went and said to Jonathan,
What have I done? What is my iniquity, and what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life?
By no means. You shall not die. Indeed, my father will do nothing either great or small without first telling me. And why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so.
Then David took an oath again.
Your father certainly knows that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said, Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death.
Whatever you yourself desire, I will do it for you.
Indeed, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king to eat. But let me go, that I may hide in the field until the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked permission of me that he might run over to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If he says thus, it is well, your servant will be safe. But if he is very angry, be sure that evil is determined by him. Therefore you shall deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. Nevertheless, if there is iniquity in me, kill me yourself. For why should you bring me to your father?
Far be it from you. For if I knew certainly that evil was determined by my father to come upon you, then would I not tell you?
Who will tell me? Or what if your father answers you roughly?
Come, let us go out into the field.
So both of them went out into the field. Then Jonathan said to David,
The Lord God of Israel is witness. When I have sounded out my father sometime tomorrow, or the third day, and indeed there is good toward David, and I do not send to you and tell you, may the Lord do so and much more to Jonathan. But if it pleases my father to do you evil, then I will report it to you and send you away, that you may go in safety. And the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. And you shall not only show me the kindness of the Lord while I still live, that I may not die, but you shall not cut off your kindness from my house forever. No, not when the Lord has cut off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth.
So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David.
Let the Lord require it at the hand of David's enemies.
Now Jonathan again caused David to vow, because he loved him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Then Jonathan said to David,
Tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. And when you have stayed 3 days, go down quickly and come to the place where you hid on the day of the deed, and remain by the stone Esau. Then I will shoot 3 arrows to the side, as though I shot at a target. And there I will send a lad, saying, Go find the arrows. If I expressly say to the lad, Look, the arrows are on this side of you, get them and come. Then, as the Lord lives, there is safety for you and no harm. But if I say thus to the young man, Look, the arrows are beyond you, go your way, for the Lord has sent you away. And as for the matter which you and I have spoken of, indeed, the Lord be between you and me forever.
Then David hid in the field, and when the new moon had come, the king sat down to eat the feast. Now the king sat on his seat, as at other times, on a seat by the wall. And Jonathan arose, and Abner sat by Saul's side, but David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought,
Something has happened to him. He is unclean. Surely he is unclean.
And it happened the next day, the 2nd day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan his son,
Why has the son of Jesse not come to eat, either yesterday or today?
David earnestly asked permission of me to go to Bethlehem. And he said, Please let me go, for our family has a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. And now, if I have found favor in your eyes, please let me get away and see my brothers. Therefore, he has not come to the king's table.
Then Saul's anger was aroused against Jonathan, and he said to him,
You son of a perverse, rebellious woman! Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse, to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness. For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, you shall not be established, nor your kingdom. Now therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die.
Why should he be killed? What has he done?
Then Saul cast a spear at him to kill him, by which Jonathan knew that it was determined by his father to kill David. So Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger, and ate no food the 2nd day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had treated him shamefully. And so it was, in the morning, that Jonathan went out into the field at the time appointed with David, and a little lad was with him. Then he said to his lad,
Now run, find the arrows which I shoot.
As the lad ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the lad had come to the place where the arrow was, which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan cried out after the lad and said,
Is not the arrow beyond you? Make haste, hurry, do not delay.
So Jonathan's lad gathered up the arrows and came back to his master. But the lad did not know anything. Only Jonathan and David knew of the matter. Then Jonathan gave his weapon to his lad and said to him,
Go, carry them to the city.
As soon as the lad had gone, David arose from a place toward the south, fell on his face to the ground, and bowed down 3 times. And they kissed one another, and they wept together, but David more so. Then Jonathan said to David,
Go in peace, since we have both sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, May the Lord be between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever.
So he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city.
All right. So that is the beginning of like the pursuit of David there. So what kind of stood out to you in this? There's a couple of interesting things. Anything?
Well, in the beginning, Jonathan's like, "What do you mean, my dad's trying to kill you?" You know,
yeah.
But it was like seemed obvious, you know. When
Yeah.
Throwing spears at him and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And what we end up seeing is that it's verse 32 and 33 that Jonathan gets a spear thrown at him, and it sounds just like what happened to David. So like I think it's maybe Jonathan is like fully realizing it now, like he's now getting treated the same as David. Like that.
Saul tries to justify it too by saying, "Well, he's taken away your lineage.
Mm.
You're going to lose everything too if we don't get rid of him."
Yeah.
He's trying to sway Jonathan to his way of thinking.
Yeah. So they make that covenant, and there's lots of things. Threes are mentioned kind of throughout all this. I don't have a whole lot to say about them. There's like 3 days. There's also there was another 3 too. Whenever you see those things, the 3 arrows. Like there's just a lot of 3s in this, which is kind of maybe a sign of rescue or something like that. They could be talking about.
What was interesting to me was that originally Jonathan said, I'll shoot the 3 arrows if they go, if I send the boy on, just run away.
Yeah.
But then when he actually did it, then they met together.
He waited. He waited to talk to him.
So like it was kind of so it's almost like he's like, that's never going to be the way it is. And then when it was like a real thing. It was like a real thing. I have on verse 41 during that where it talks about that David wept even more. Like I have a note that said like you could see the love of David there, where he's you're not going to see a friend for a while. No. I thought Saul's anger right before he throws the spear was interesting. Verse 30, he says something not so kind about Jonathan's mother.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, of a perverse, rebellious woman. And then again, we see nakedness brought up again, like it was in the last chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like shame of your mother's nakedness. So again, we're kind of seeing that idea of the nakedness kind of being a place of shame and
This is
all that.
confusion in mine of my mother's nakedness.
Yeah. So confusion in my
It's kind of like totally revealing yourself.
Yeah. And so just kind of saying some not so kind things about his own mother there.
Saul, angry enough, would kill his own son.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which so that brings up what we end up seeing in a lot of these kings, all the way up to Herod, where it's they're so enamored with keeping their kingship that anything that they think is getting in the line, they're willing to get rid of it to keep it, and that's like a consistent theme. I think it's just a consistent theme throughout power in general, but that's
Power will do it every time.
yeah.
Where was Samuel when all this was going on? Did
Well,
he not stay there with the king?
I think Samuel's getting old. David went and hung out with Samuel. What was that in 19? Like that's one of the chapters we read. Like say, David went out and he spent some time with Samuel, and kind of a protection type of thing. But I imagine Samuel's probably pretty old now, and like that's. And remember, like when Saul came on the king, like Samuel kind of took a step back. He was like, this isn't me anymore. That's so like he's still around, but he's definitely not the big part of the story as of right now. Yeah. Anyone notice anything else before we?
I thought it was interesting, 13, 14, 15, where Jonathan makes a covenant with David. Kind of, he realizes that David will be king.
Yeah.
And don't kill me, because I think that used to happen.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know, that, if someone new takes over, you just kill the other king's
kill the whole family.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's an interesting outlook on that. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Like they're kind of keeping the power. It's like, hey, remember what I did for you here.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's good.
He's also in there. He says, "May the Lord be with you, as He used to be with my father."
Okay.
So at this point, Jonathan knows Saul is really gone now.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, and there's some important stuff that we got coming on. Like the next time we talk about all this stuff, you got Jesus quotes the next story. Like that's this kind of wanderings of David, kind of running from Saul, is very important to the stories that kind of follow past. So the next time we get together and talk about this month or so, it'll be good. It'll be good. But yeah, so we'll start this. We'll say goodbye to YouTube. Thanks for joining us, YouTube, and